You clicked because the idea sounds impossible. A battery you build for about $5 that keeps working long after the ones you paid good money for have died in a drawer. I did not believe it either. So I tested it, in my own kitchen, with a stopwatch and a pack of name-brand batteries sitting right next to a little stack of old copper coins. Here is the verdict up front. The stack of coins won. Not by a little, by decades. This is an old Chinese household trick built from copper cash, coins, salt, and paper, and it was never sold on a shelf because there is almost nothing in it to sell you. And before you scroll away thinking you need a workshop, hear this. There is a real battery sitting in a laboratory in England that has been running on this exact principle since 1840. I will show you how it works, and I promise you can build a smaller version this weekend on a rental kitchen counter with no tools and no permission. I still remember the first time I saw one. It was in an old apartment above a herbal medicine shop, and an elderly man had a tiny stack of green-edged coins wrapped in wax paper, humming faintly against a little bell. I thought it was a toy. It was ticking a clock that he swore he had not touched in 11 years. So let me take you through the test I ran, because the deeper I went, the stranger it got. Let me start with the thing that made me angry enough to try this in the first place. I went to my kitchen drawer, the junk drawer everybody has, and I counted 7 dead batteries in there. 7. 2 of them had that crusty white powder leaking out the top, the kind that ruins the little metal springs inside your remote and your flashlight. I added up what I had spent on batteries in 1 year for just the small stuff around my house. The wall clock, 2 remotes, a smoke alarm, a kitchen scale, a little motion light by the back door. It came to just under $40 a year. $40, year after year, for power that dies and then leaks and then damages the very thing it was supposed to run. That is the expensive side of my test. A 4-pack of decent alkaline batteries runs about $8, and I was buying 5 or 6 packs a year without even thinking about it. Now here is the traditional side. In old Chinese households, especially in the South, where copper cash coins were everywhere for centuries, people understood something about metal and salt that most of us forgot. Those old coins, the round ones with the square hole in the middle, were nearly pure copper. And copper, when you pair it with a second metal and put a little salty moisture between them, does something quietly remarkable. It makes electricity, not a spark you can see, a slow, patient trickle you can measure. The square hole was not just for stringing coins on a cord. It turns out to be perfect for stacking them straight and threading them together, which is exactly what you need to build a pile. Here is the plain science, the way I finally understood it after I stopped being confused by it. When you put 2 different metals close together with a salty or sour liquid between them, one metal gives up tiny particles and the other one takes them. That movement of particles is electricity. A single pair, 1 copper coin and 1 piece of a second metal, makes about half a volt to almost a full volt. That is not much. But stack 10 of them, and you have 5 or 6 volts. Stack more, and you climb higher. Volta, the Italian who gave us the word volt, built the very first one of these in the year 1800, and he called it a pile, because that is literally what it is, a pile of metal discs. But the Chinese coin version has one advantage nobody talks about. The coins are already flat, already round, already drilled through the center, as if they were made to be stacked into a battery 2,000 years before anyone knew what a battery was. So I built one, and this is where the test got interesting. Here is exactly what I used, and I want you to notice how little it cost. I got a small stack of old copper coins from a flea market for about $3. You do not need the ancient ones. Any clean copper coin works, and where I live, the copper-colored penny does the job for pennies, literally. For the second metal, I used the aluminum foil already in my kitchen drawer. Free. For the moisture, I mixed regular table salt into warm water and a splash of white vinegar, maybe 10 cents worth. And I cut circles out of a paper towel to soak up that salt water and sit between each coin. So my total, if I am generous, was $3 and change, and most of it I already owned. The building part took me about 15 minutes the first time. You lay down a coin. On top of it, a paper circle soaked in the salt water, squeezed so it is damp but not dripping. On top of that, a foil circle the same size. Then another coin, then paper, then foil. Copper, paper, foil, over and over, always the same order, so the stack never gets its layers crossed. I made a pile about 15 layers tall, wrapped a bare wire against the bottom coin and another against the top foil, and touched the two wires to a little red light. It glowed. First try. A stack of coins and a wet paper towel glowing in my hand, and I actually laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. But glowing for a second is not the test. Anyone can make a light flicker. The real question, the one that would decide the whole thing, was time. Would it last? Therefore, I set up the real contest. On the left side of my counter, a plain battery-powered wall clock running on one fresh alkaline battery, the kind I had been buying for years. On the right side, the same model of clock, but I rigged it to run off my coin pile instead. 2 clocks, side by side, both starting at the same second, and I wrote the date on a piece of tape stuck to the wall behind them. Then I walked away and let time do the judging. And here is where I have to tell you what almost nobody selling batteries wants you to sit and think about. A battery is designed to die. Not by accident, by design. The chemistry inside a store battery is packed to give you a strong, fast burst of power, and that same chemistry eats itself alive doing it. The more current it pushes, the faster it destroys its own insides. And when it finally quits, that leftover chemistry turns to that white crust and leaks out and corrodes everything it touches. I have thrown away flashlights over that leak. Maybe you have too. The coin pile does the opposite. It gives a tiny, gentle trickle. And because the trickle is so small, the metals barely wear down at all. It is slow on purpose, and slow is exactly what lets it last. A wall clock or a small light barely sips power. It does not need the fast burst. It needs a long, quiet drip, and that is the one thing a pile of copper and salt and paper is perfect at giving. So which clock died first? The alkaline one. Of course it did. It ran its year, gave me that little leak, and quit, right on schedule, right on the schedule that keeps me driving back to the store. The coin clock kept ticking, but by itself that only proves a year, and I promised you 100. So stay with me, because the reason this thing can run for a century is the part that genuinely stunned me, and it comes from a real object you can look up right now. But before I get to that, I need to talk to you if you rent, because this next part was built specifically for you, and I do not want you thinking any of this needs a landlord or a drill or a single hole in a wall. Everything I just described you can do on a kitchen counter and pack away in a shoebox. There is no wiring into your home. There is nothing screwed into a wall. There is nothing your landlord could ever object to, because it is a stack of coins on a saucer. If you rent, you have probably felt locked out of every self-reliance trick, because every video tells you to install this or hardwire that or drill into something you do not own. This is not that. This is the opposite of that. A renter in a single room can build this in a drawer and run a clock, a small light, or a low-power sensor off it, and when you move out, you put the coins in your pocket and walk away. And here is the renter trick inside the trick. You do not even need the coins to be permanent. Because the whole thing runs on salt water and paper, you can take it apart, dry the coins, and rebuild it in your next apartment in 15 minutes. Nothing is consumed except a wet paper towel. I tested this too. I broke my pile down, wiped the coins with a little vinegar to clean the dull film off them, restacked it with fresh, damp paper, and it came right back to life at nearly the same strength. Try doing that with a dead alkaline battery. You cannot. Once it is dead, it is trash, and it is trash that leaks. So a renter with $3 in coins, a roll of foil, a paper towel, and a salt shaker has a rebuildable power source that follows them from apartment to apartment for the rest of their life. That is the part that made me stop thinking of this as a gimmick and start thinking of it as something that was quietly taken from us. Because here is the uncomfortable question I could not shake while I watched those 2 clocks. If a stack of coins and a wet napkin can run a clock, why did nobody ever tell me? Why did I spend $40 a year for 20 years feeding a drawer full of leaking trash? And the answer is not a mystery. The answer is that nobody can sell you this. There is no cartridge to reorder. There is no expiration date to bring you back to the shelf. The coins do not run out. The foil is already in your kitchen, and the salt costs a few cents. A thing that lasts and cannot be repackaged is a thing that no company will ever advertise to you. It is not hidden in a vault. It is hidden in plain sight, in the fact that no one makes money reminding you it exists. And the old households that used it never needed a company to tell them. They passed it hand to hand, coin to coin, the way that old man above the medicine shop passed it to whoever was patient enough to watch his bell. If this kind of thinking speaks to you, the idea that the cheap, forgotten fix keeps beating the thing you were sold, then you might want to know that I have gone much deeper on topics exactly like this in my books, House Fixes, Deep Fixes, and House Fixed. Each one is a collection of the same kind of head-to-head tests I run here, written out with the full details so you can work through them at your own pace, away from a screen. You will find them linked in the description below. Now, back to the coin pile. Because the traditional side of this story is where things get genuinely strange. Therefore, I went looking for proof that this could really last not just a year, but a lifetime. And what I found is almost hard to believe, except that people have been staring at it for nearly 200 years. There is a small device in a laboratory at Oxford, in England, and it is called by most people the Oxford electric bell. It is a little bell with a tiny metal ball that swings back and forth, tapping first one side and then the other. It has been swinging and tapping and ringing since the year 1840. Let that number sit with you. 1840. That is longer than the telephone has existed, longer than the light bulb. It has rung something like 10 billion times, and it is still going. And in all that time, nobody has ever changed its battery. Because its battery is a dry pile, the very same idea as my stack of coins, copper and a second metal and a thin, dry layer between them, sealed up so it barely loses any moisture. Scientists have been so careful with it that they will not even open it to study the chemistry, because they do not want to interrupt the longest-running experiment of its kind in the world. That is the anchor. That is the proof that this is not a party trick. A dry pile, kept sealed and asked to do only a tiny amount of work, will run not for months, not for years, but for lifetimes. The reason it lasts is the same reason my coin clock outlived the alkaline one. It sips instead of gulps. The gentler the draw, the longer the pile. Ask it for almost nothing, and it will give you that almost nothing for 100 years. So the trick to making your own pile last is not some secret ingredient. It is two things, and both are free. First, keep it sealed, so the moisture inside does not dry out and does not flood. The old way was wax paper and a little melted wax around the edges, and I used a small screw-top jar with the stack inside and a dab of candle wax around the seam. Second, and this is the real secret, only ask it to power something that draws a tiny amount. A clock, a single small light, a little sensor. The moment you try to make it run something hungry, like a phone, it will sag and struggle, because you are asking a gentle spring to be a fire hose. Respect what it is, and it will outlast you. Now let me give you the exact recipe for the long-lasting version, because the 15-minute one I built first is great for proving the point, but the sealed dry version is the one that chases 100 years. Start with your copper coins, cleaned. I soak mine in a little vinegar and salt for 2 minutes until the copper goes bright, then rinse and dry them completely. For the second metal, thin aluminum works, but I got even better, steadier results with zinc. And the cheapest zinc most people already have access to is a galvanized washer from any hardware store, a few cents each, or the zinc casing you can peel from certain coins depending on where you live. For the layer between them, instead of a soaking wet paper towel, cut thin cardboard or heavy paper circles and dampen them with the salt solution, then blot them so they are barely moist, wet enough to work, dry enough not to corrode fast. That balance is the whole difference between a pile that lasts a season and a pile that lasts a lifetime. Stack them in the same strict order: copper, damp paper, zinc, copper, damp paper, zinc. Build it as tall as the voltage you want. 10 pairs gave me enough to run a small clock with room to spare. Then seal it. I stand the stack inside a slim glass jar, press the layers snug with a little wooden dowel on top, run my 2 wires out through the lid, and seal the lid rim with candle wax, so the moisture inside stays balanced for years. That sealed jar, sitting on a shelf, is my 100-year battery. It cost me under $5 all in, and most of that was the jar. But I know what you are thinking, because I thought it too. A clock is cute. What can this actually do that matters in a real house? So I pushed the test further, and this is where it earned my respect for good. I wired 3 of my sealed piles together and ran a string of tiny low-power lights, the kind that sip current, along a dark hallway where I never wanted to change a battery again. It has been glowing softly for months. I ran a small digital thermometer off one. I ran the little clock that started this whole thing, and it is still ticking on the same coins, having never once needed a store-bought battery, while its twin on the left side of my counter went through, at this point, its replacements one after another. The tape on my wall tells the story better than I can. One side, a graveyard of dead alkaline batteries. The other side, the same coins, still working, still free. And here is the cost tally that I promised you at the start, laid out plain. The expensive way, the store batteries for all my little household devices, ran me just under $40 every single year, plus the ruined flashlight, plus the corroded remote, plus the trip to the store, plus the dead batteries I have to drive to a special drop-off because you are not even supposed to throw them in the trash. The cheap way, the coin pile, cost me under $5 one time, and it rebuilds from the same parts forever. Over 20 years, that is close to $800, I was feeding into a drawer, against $5 I spent once. $800 against $5. That was the moment I stopped feeling clever and started feeling a little bit cheated. Because think about who profited from me never running this test. Every year I bought batteries because I believed power for small devices had to come sealed in plastic from a shelf, had to have a brand, had to have a price. And the whole time, the households that could not run to a store, the ones who kept the old copper coin knowledge alive out of pure necessity, had a quieter answer that never expired and never leaked and never asked for a reorder. They were not smarter than me. They just never had the option to be lazy about it, and so they never forgot. Let me answer the doubts I know you still have, because I had every single one of them. You are wondering if it is dangerous. It is not. The voltage is low and the current is tiny. You can hold the wires. The worst thing that happens is a little salty water gets on your counter and you wipe it up. There is no fire risk from a properly built low-current pile, because there is barely any current to begin with. That gentleness is the entire point. You are wondering if the coins get ruined. In the sealed, dry version, barely. That is the lesson of the Oxford bell. When the drawer is tiny and the moisture is balanced, the metals hardly wear at all, which is exactly why that little bell has rung for nearly 2 centuries on the same pile. In the wet version, the coins will dull and green over time, but a 2-minute soak in salt and vinegar brings them right back, and you have lost nothing but a paper towel. You are wondering if it can really run for 100 years in your house. Honestly, I cannot personally promise you 100 years, because I have not lived 100 years to test it, and I will not lie to you the way a package would. But I can point you to the bell that has done it, on this exact principle, since 1840, and I can show you my own clock that has never taken a store battery and is still ticking, and I can tell you the science is not in question. Sip instead of gulp, seal it well, and this thing outlives its maker. That is not a promise from me. That is a fact you can go read about a laboratory in England. And you are wondering, if you rent, whether any of this touches your life. It touches it more than anyone's. You are the person paying for batteries in a place you do not own, throwing money at devices that are not even yours to keep, and this gives you a power source that lives in a jar, follows you when you move, costs a few dollars once, and never puts a mark on a wall or a lease. If self-reliance always felt like it was written for homeowners with garages, this is the trick that was quietly waiting for you the whole time. So here is what the test finally taught me. The thing under all the numbers. I spent years believing that the honest answer had to be the one that cost money, that if a stack of coins really worked, someone would have sold it to me by now, and it was exactly backwards. The reason no one sold it to me is the reason it works. There is nothing in it to run out, nothing to reorder, nothing to expire. The cheap fix did not lose because it was cheap. It won because it was cheap, and it won because it was patient, and it won because an old household somewhere refused to forget it while the rest of us were busy buying the same dead batteries over and over. If you are the kind of person who wants proof instead of a slogan, who is tired of feeding a drawer with leaking plastic and calling it normal, then you already belong here, because that is the only kind of person this channel is for. You do not want to be sold to. You want to be shown, so I showed you. Now I want to hear from you, and I want a real answer, not just a thumbs up. Tell me in the comments what you are going to run off your first pile. A clock, a hallway light, a little sensor by the door, what is it going to be? And tell me this too, because I am genuinely curious. How many dead batteries are sitting in your junk drawer right now? Go count them. Come back and put the number in the comments. I counted 7 in mine, and that number is what started this whole thing. If this changed the way you look at that drawer, then come with me, because this is exactly what we do here. We take the expensive thing you have been told you need, and we put it head to head against the few dollar trick the old households never stopped using, and we let the stopwatch and the tape on the wall decide. No marketing, just the test. And next time, I am putting a bowl of cheap dried herb that costs about $1 against the plug-in chemical thing everyone buys for their kitchen, the one that promises to keep every crawling insect out. I ran that test too, on my own counter, through a whole summer, and the result was not close. Bring your doubt. It is the most useful tool you own, and it is the reason you will believe me when the cheap thing wins. Before you go, let me tell you where this goes next. This video showed you the idea, but inside the old home wisdom, I walk you through the full coin pile build, every layer measured, so yours holds a charge. In there, ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing it alone. You'll belong. Just point your phone at the code on screen. Cancel anytime, 1 click. If this helped you today, do stay with me and subscribe. I have plenty more simple, money-saving tricks right here on the channel, made just for you. So keep watching.